Well, greetings. It's Dr. Blevins, and I wanted to take just a few minutes to provide a video that kind of orients where we are in the class as we move forward into next week's online engagement. Let me say first and foremost, thank you to all of you for the really good content and engagement that you've been doing. So I know how the class works. It's anticipation that you'll be there online 3 times during the week. So you're posting an initial post, not always having to summarize everything in the reading, but finding the things that capture your attention and posting those initial reactions. Then we're engaging with each other between Tuesday and Thursday, really just sort of interacting with each other. And as I've said before, if you're posting, somewhere around 2 to 3 of those, and they're kind of just modest in the way you're engaging with each other, that's usually about 80 to 85%. That's an average engagement for that week through those first 3 days of the class interaction. And if you're worried about that, average 80 to 85%, we're talking about 15 points a week. So we're talking about at most a reduction down to somewhere around 12 points. Now that could be reduced a little bit more if you're not citing your sources, you're not really engaging substantively, you're just doing. You've heard my cautions about attaboy and attagirl kinds of comments. But if you're actually putting in the third, the fourth post, maybe at most 5, and I really wouldn't expect that all the time, and you are drawing in the reading at the same time, then you should be receiving the full 15 points for that part of the class engagement. And then the final 10 points, really as a reminder, is coming back in at the end of the week, reading through your classmates' discussions, since I'm not expecting you to master the content, and drawing all of that into whatever the assignment was for your summary. Sometimes it's kind of a general summarization. Sometimes, particularly with this class in mind, I have put more prompts, if you will, in the summaries to kind of get you thinking about key elements that tie into your major project for this semester. So this is a good week just to kind of highlight that. So we're at the end of week 5. And if you know, at the bottom of week 5, it said read through classmates. And then it asks you, what might a discipleship mission statement look like based on your understanding of your context and conviction? So yeah, I did ask you generally what is faithful discipleship, but then I pushed it a little bit harder to say, by the way, what would a mission statement look like where you are? And hopefully, I haven't graded these yet, but hopefully you've been thinking a little bit of a both and at that point in this summary. It was just a little bit of a different prompt. But if you wonder why, well, if you go all the way back up to the previous week, right at the beginning of this 2-week segment, there was a micro lecture on a theological turn. And in that lecture, basically, we talked about a theology of discipleship. This was my lecture to you. And I even talked about the things that go into it around the authority, the nature of persons, the goals, its organization, implementation, evaluation. Are we supposed to do all that? No, but that's all the stuff that really does go into that. And most of the time, when you are thinking about sort of your vision of faithful discipleship, your philosophy of discipleship or Christian education, it does include addressing the subject or the content that you're teaching, something about the nature of the teacher and the learner, the reason for that discipleship, the context, kind of how that shapes that, the methods and the outcomes that you think are important. Are there certain particular approaches, even approaches to scripture, for instance? Would you take a narrative approach and predominantly when you engage scripture, would you think about that as a way of actually using narrative method as well? And we'll talk more about that actually as the semester unfolds. And what does transformation really look like from your standpoint becomes part of the question. Now, I don't want you to panic. I wasn't asking for all that down here in this little exercise at the end of this past week. But if you take time and go up to under the general information, one thing you will find up there is the congregational assessment rubric. And this is a good time to kind of point that out because of where we are in the semester, even though we're at week 5, but knowing you've got, spring break coming up in a couple of weeks, I thought I'd point this out to you now. And under that, where you look at your whole congregational assessment and strategy for educational ministry, this big project that you have at the end of the semester, underneath that, we've already begun the conversation around the first two big pieces. So yeah, we've really begun to talk about the assessment. If you remember, I did ask you to kind of state a personality, and you probably began thinking about some of the programs, some of the elements or processes, some of the dynamics that are at work in that congregation. Now, you may not have them in such a way that they're highly organized and that they're presented in such a way that they clarify and elaborate on that personality, or that they actually all synthesize together. But for that major project, you'll be headed that direction before it's over with. And now might be a good time to start talking with your peer reviewer or your supervisor, if you want to think of that person, depending on your relationship with them, and really begin to sort of test out the fullness of what you think constitutes your ministry context, that church that you're serving, knowing that, yep, I'm going to be asking for a kind of way of characterizing, not caricaturing, but characterizing the personality, and then giving a firm account of how it connects to programs and processes. All of that was in an earlier presentation by me. And this past week, yeah, I got you thinking about a mission statement. And you may not have even thought about all the goals, or but maybe as you were thinking about what you thought was faithful discipleship, you were starting to tease out that philosophy of Christian education and its connections to that. But down the road, yeah, I will be wanting you to kind of push out, start to find those connections between all of that. Now, if you remember in the lecture, sort of like I ask you to think about a personality, I also in the lecture ask you to think about a metaphor that sort of summarizes your vision of what is faithful discipleship. And the reason is because normally a lot of times when people ask us a question, we may only have 2 or 3 minutes to try to communicate the gist of what we think is important. And I think you know by now, if you've been reading the book, that for me, faithful discipleship is participating in the means of grace so that we might become means of grace to others. That's how I've always articulated it. And I have a full dissertation that can take you through basically the underlying philosophy and the statements and the kind of goals that go with that, and why you're encountering that through the reading of the textbook. And though Mark Maddox is contributing as well his own philosophy at times inside that conversation. But before it's over, I'm hoping you'll have a really clear mission statement for discipleship or for Christian education. So, can you just use your church's mission statement? No. What does discipleship look like in that church? Under that becomes maybe a bigger question. And particularly, how does discipleship serve that broader mission statement? What is it about that mission statement dedicated to discipleship or Christian education, if you prefer that language, that really comes alongside the bigger vision of what the church's mission statement is? But even as you do that, I'm hoping you're going to connect it to, well, not just the context and how that happened there, but also your own personal philosophy or theology of discipleship, so that you can say, this is a mission statement that really focuses on discipleship, that is one that is true to the context and its vision, but also true to my own personal heart and vision at the same time. Should you have arrived there already? No, no. This is a semester-long exercise, but at least two of the big four. The other one is a 2-year strategy, and then some practical ideas and interventions. Two of the big four rocks, if you will, are already available to you, so you can continue to refine and work on that, be in dialogue. This might be, alongside a book review somewhere down the road, this might be a major part of what you dedicate some of your spring break to, knowing you can work on it now, knowing you have the rudiments, the elements, if you will, to begin that process and then flesh that out well. But there will be more things to consider, and our readings and engagement will help us think through the more strategically the 2-year strategy, and even begin to think about particular ideas or interventions that come to mind. So all of that will weave itself together as the semester ends. But for now, at least you know where you stand. Well, where else do you have to engage in? Well, I did want to mention, if you go back, that next week, when we drop down to week 6, your assignment includes reading, yeah, part 2 of Discovering Discipleship. So we're bouncing back to the other book this week, kind of this tag team approach. But I'm also asking you to take a learning styles inventory by David Kolb, and you'll see the link to that. And when you click on that link, what you'll do is it will take you to a page where it has the KLEP, or the Kolb Experiential Learning Profile. That's the learning styles inventory. So for those of you who've done a Myers-Briggs inventory, or if you've done the Enneagram for other classes, this is very much similar to that, but with learning and learning styles in mind. So yes, it costs you $35. You do have to do that. Take the online assessment. You do get a lot of resources provided to you at the same time. As a matter of fact, one thing you will get is your own learning style, sort of portrayed in the form of a kite. And so it will look not even kite, but it'll have a kind of configuration, a heart, or maybe something really long and elongated. It just has a different kind of look that corresponds to maybe not neatly one of the 9 learning styles, but kind of incorporates maybe a couple of these. So if the kite looks a little bit odd, don't be surprised by that. What I will ask you to do, though, is that under this week's assignment, when you go inside and you open up the thread for that, that not only will you comment, but I do want you to post a picture. It could be a screen capture. It's probably the easiest way to do it, or you might print it to a PDF and attach it, but that might be a little bit big. I think most of the time, normally what you do is you hit reply. Always remember to go into advanced, and then you get this menu, and it even has a place to insert an image. And if you go in, and once you see your kite, you just capture that with some kind of a snip device or some other way on your computer. Usually that little small GIF file is small enough that you can actually then literally save the image. You can upload. It gives you a URL. I wouldn't try that, but I think you can actually import the image and save it and adjust it as it's needed. So I am going to ask you to kind of post that so that we each visually connect with each other's learning style through those visual those visual pieces. By the way, if you want to know more, let me just back out of this for a second. There is a second link under this week's discussion guide, and it does take you to this page on the learning style. It's a lot of the background information, the major contributors who've really worked on this. But before you think this is just sort of a private project, you'll find a research library with bibliography, current studies, even a lot of resources that go along with it, as well as a lot of background information on experiential learning. And we'll unpack that over the next couple of weeks as well. But I did want you to know that this particular learning style inventory really does come with a lot of academic backing and has been used heavily in a lot of places, including for some of you in your own supervised ministry experiences. So Kolb has those connections in what we're doing in this class to your larger degree goals when it comes to the MDiv, but also the MATL. Okay. Well, I'll stop the share just long enough one more time to thank you for all the good work you've been doing. I do appreciate the interaction, and do look forward to seeing you next week online. And as you know, I don't try to reply to everybody. I'm just trusting that if you're hitting those benchmarks of three times a week engagement, and you're doing some substantive interaction, and you're learning from each other as well as learning from your context, that my work, these sort of strategic lectures on occasion that are there to help you with your final project, as well as the readings, are a major part of how you're learning together in this course. But if you ever have any concerns, you can always reach out to me by email. All right. I'll be blessed. Be praying for you through this next week. I know we've got a couple more weeks before we head into spring break. So hopefully we'll actually just keep working forward and understanding the nature of discipleship, but always thinking about it in light of our context and therefore growing together. As we and I really want you to hear, hopefully coming up with projects that will really make a difference in the very context that we are connected to and that we serve. Okay. Well, blessings, everyone. See you online. Take care.